Revan, have you finished eating? Sharon quickly withdrew her hand from Revan's grasp. She stood up and cleaned up where Revan had eaten. Her heart was beating so fast that her hands were shaking. A feeling of fear and anxiety suddenly attacked Sharon. Cinta came in and approached Revan, who was sitting on the bed. She glanced at Sharon, who was cleaning up Revan's mess.
Already, Mom. I want to rest again. I'll feel better later.
Revan replied. He put on a reassuring smile, even though his heart was beating fast when he realized what he had said to Sharon. He felt like a madman. How could he ask a girl his son's age to be his wife?
That's all right. Everything is done. All we have to do is wait for the two girls to come home and buy the cake,
Cinta said. Revan nodded slowly. Sharon turned around and excused herself to leave first. She looked in a hurry, making Cinta wonder.
What's wrong with Sharon?
Don't know, ma'am.
Revan answered with a lie. He knew that Sharon was probably like that because of his question earlier. Fortunately, Sharon didn't flinch when she heard that.
That's all right. Now you rest. Mum wants to take a shower first.
Cinta walked out, leaving Revan alone. Revan exhaled softly, feeling guilty for Sharon. Let it be. He will apologize later. At 4 in the afternoon, Vano and Vion returned home. Their faces looked tired and sluggish, but turned cheerful when they entered the house.
Happy birthday.
Vano and Vion laughed softly at the simple surprise prepared for them. They walked closer to the wall and saw the beautiful decorations.
Thank you. This is really amazing,
Vano said. Then Novi and Renata approached their respective girlfriends with birthday cakes in their hands. Vano and Vion closed their eyes, making a wish. Then they blew out the candles. After that, the cake was cut into several pieces. They enjoyed it, not forgetting to take some photos as memories. While enjoying the event, a bell suddenly rang. Spontaneously, everyone's eyes were immediately drawn to the main door. Because Sharon was the closest, she opened the door.
Wow, what a coincidence that I came during an event.
The guest, who was a woman, immediately entered before Sharon invited her. The originally lively atmosphere turned into silence. Revan and Cinta's faces turned tense, seeing who had come.
I didn't expect my children to have grown up.
She was Dilla, Vano, and Vion's biological mother. She immediately stepped up to her two sons and hugged them in turn. Novi and Renata walked backwards, giving Dilla access.
What are you doing here?
The first question that came out of Vano's lips. His eyes never stopped watching the woman who gave birth to him, who hadn't seen him and Vion in 10 years.
I want to see you, all this time. It's been difficult for me to see you.
Her face made a sad face and glanced at Revan briefly, creating a drama, as if Revan forbade her from seeing Vano and Vion.
Don't spread slander, Dilla.
Revan rebuked her. His eyes looked sharply at his ex-wife.
It's true, isn't it? I have more right to be with my children than you do.
The court gave me custody of the children because you were at fault. I always talked to you to visit them as often as possible. But you seem to forget they're here.
Revan hissed. Dilla immediately glared at Revan for ruining her good name in front of her two children.
You're such an ignorant woman. You'd better get out of here. Your arrival is ruining the atmosphere,
Cinta said angrily. Dilla smiled sarcastically at that. She knew how much Cinta hated her.
Vano, Vion, I actually have something to say to you.
Dilla faced her two children, looking at them seriously.
Actually, you guys are...
Before Dilla could finish her sentence, Revan grabbed her wrist and dragged her out of the house. Revan's originally calm and gentle face turned sinister and cold.
Mom, Dad.
Vano and Vion prepared to follow their parents. However, Cinta held them back.
Let your father solve the problem. Don't let you believe Dilla, who wants to ruin your good relationship with Revan,
Cinta warned. Vano and Vion were silent upon hearing that. They didn't know what Revan and Dilla were talking about outside. Revan had been arguing with Dilla in the yard for quite some time. Revan's calm demeanor disappeared immediately. He looked very emotional when facing his ex-wife.
Don't destroy the children's future, Dilla. If you can't be a good mother, at least don't interfere with their growth.
Revan snapped at Dilla. He was already overcome with rage.
But I'm their mother. I have more rights over them than you do.
Mother? You call yourself a mother. Where have you been for the past 10 years? You can't even be a good figurehead for Vano and Vion.
Revan a deep breath and exhaled slowly, trying to subdue his rising emotions. Dilla had destroyed his composure.
Go away. Don't let me drag you roughly out of here.
Then he turned around, entering the house, leaving an angry-looking Dilla in the yard.
Dad, what's wrong?
Vion immediately asked his father. Revan sighed softly, then approached his two children and hugged them, patting their backs lightly.
Please don't believe if your mother badmouths Papa or says strange things. It's just her trick.
Revan whispered.
You are adults now. You must be able to see clearly what is good and bad for you.
After that, Revan excused himself and went upstairs. He wasn't fully recovered yet, and his head was spinning again from dealing with Dilla just now. He wanted to rest. Sharon stood still by the door, staring at Revan's fragile-looking back. From his face, Revan looked like he was carrying a heavy burden, and Sharon guessed it must be all related to Vano and Vion's biological mother.
Let Revan rest. Don't let anyone disturb him.
After Dilla's presence, the atmosphere changed drastically. Vano and Vion became more silent and dreamy. The unfinished words of their biological mother made curiosity fill them. However, it was impossible for them to ask their grandmother or father directly. Since entering the room earlier until now, Revan has not come out again. Cinta chose to be alone in the guest room. Not only Revan, Cinta also seemed to be thinking about something heavy. Novi and Renata accompanied Vano and Vion in the living room, trying to comfort them who were confused and curious. Sharon, meanwhile, was helping the art clean up. She didn't want to be the third person between her friends who were with their boyfriends.
Big aside, Grandma and Revan haven't eaten since earlier?
Sharon asked as Bikasai, the art at Revan's house, was about to put all the dishes into the refrigerator. Bikasai, the butler, said they were both locked themselves in their rooms. He didn't know what to do.
Bike, please just prepare 2 servings. Let me take them to Grandma and Revan's room. They haven't eaten yet, especially since Revan isn't feeling well.
Bikasai nodded, immediately obeying Sharon's orders. Sharon, meanwhile, made her way to the living room, intending to meet the twins and their friends.
You guys haven't eaten yet?
Sharon came over to those who were silent. Not yet, Ren. I have no appetite, Novi replied.
Force it. You haven't eaten since earlier. Vano, Vion, you should eat soon too. It's a pity for Grandma, who's been cooking so hard, but no one's eating.
The 4 of them looked at each other after hearing Sharon's words. Despite their lack of appetite for food, they forced themselves to eat, appreciating the efforts of Cinta, who had been cooking since earlier.
Aren't you going to eat, Rang?
Asked Renata when she saw Sharon not sitting with her.
I'll come later. I want to take this food to Grandma and Revan first.
Sharon replied.
What's wrong?
Cinta asked from inside.
This is Sharon, Grandma. I brought some food.
Sharon stayed at the door for a long time. Then the door opened, revealing Cinta with her sad face.
Grandma's crying,
asked Sharon in surprise. Cinta sighed softly and told Sharon to come in.
Thank you very much. You're very considerate,
said Cinta. She sat on the edge of the bed, looking at Sharon, who was putting the tray on top of the drawer.
You're welcome. Looking at you, I'm reminded of my late grandmother. I couldn't take proper care of my grandmother because I was busy at school. Grandma, would you like me to warm the food?
No need. Has Revan come out of the room yet?
Not yet, Nana. After I leave here, I also intend to deliver food to Revan's room.
Ah, yes. Go ahead. Revan can't be late for food and medicine. You'd better get some food for him right away.
Cinta said as she spooned some rice into her mouth. Sharon obeyed Cinta's order and got out of there. Taking the other tray, she brought it to Revan's room. When she entered, Revan was sitting on the balcony. Sharon thought he was sleeping, but he wasn't.
Revan, eat first, then take some more medicine.
Sharon spoke from inside the room. Revan looked away for a moment, then stood up and entered the room.
Did you eat?
Revan asked as he sat on the sofa. Sharon put the food for Revan on the table.
I delivered food to Grandmother just now, and Grandma told me to bring food here for Revan.
Sharon replied. She sat down opposite Revan, who started eating his food.
Vano and Vion?
They're also eating downstairs.
Are they okay?
I don't know. I see something seems to be bothering their minds.
Revan sighed softly at that. His anger rose again for Dilla. That woman had completely destroyed the calm atmosphere Revan had worked so hard to build since their divorce. And Dilla just came and ruined it all. It made Vano and Vion think.
Sharon, I'm sorry about earlier. I couldn't control my own words.
Revan looked regretful, remembering what he said to Sharon earlier. Ashamed, too, for asking for things that Sharon couldn't possibly grant. Ashamed for being like someone who doesn't realize his age. Sharon was worried about Revan's condition. She had heard from the nurses that he had been admitted to the hospital because of exhaustion and stress. She couldn't help but feel concerned for him, especially since she knew that he had just gone through a divorce.
Oh, how are you feeling?
Sharon asked as she entered Revan's hospital room. She saw that Revan was lying on the bed, looking tired and weak. Revan looked up at Sharon and forced a smile.
I'm fine. Sharon, don't worry about me.
He replied weakly.
But you don't look fine. You need to take care of yourself.
Sharon insisted, her voice filled with worry. Revan sighed and closed his eyes.
I know, but I just can't seem to focus on anything right now.
Is there anything I can do to help?
Sharon asked, feeling a sense of responsibility towards Revan. Revan opened his eyes and looked at Sharon gratefully.
Actually, there is something you can do for me.
What is it?
Sharon asked, eager to help in any way she could.
Can you please tell Vion and Vano not to believe what their mother says?
Revan asked, his voice filled with desperation and worry.
I'll do my best,
Sharon promised, wanting to ease Revan's concerns.
Thank you. You've helped me a lot.
Revan said sincerely.
You're welcome. Revan also helped me a lot,
Sharon replied with a smile. After cleaning up, Sharon excused herself to leave. Revan watched her leave, feeling a strange throbbing in his chest.
Looks like I need a lot of rest.
Revan muttered to himself.
Perhaps it's because of my lack of focus.
Hearing Novi's explanation, Vano and Vion tried to restrain themselves and not interfere in their father's personal matters. They tried to be casual with Revan and Sharon. Sometimes, though, their hearts ached to hear a confession from both of them. Because of this problem, Vano and Vion unconsciously often observe Sharon's movements. Novi and Renata are aware of their girlfriend's behavior. However, they realize that maybe Vano and Vion just wanted to make sure Sharon didn't do anything bad. Often Vano and Vion see Sharon and Revan having lunch together and traveling together. Seeing the happiness on their father's face made them feel heartless. Since the divorce with their mother, they had never seen Revan laugh out loud. Never again did they see the happy look in his eyes, because they realized that Revan was trying hard to be a good father to both of them, to the point where Revan put his own happiness aside.
Looks like there's something between them.
Vion muttered.
Do you guys mind?
Asked Renata carefully. Vano and Vion were silent upon hearing that. They tried to dig into the bottom of their hearts about the feelings they felt when they knew all this. There was a sense of unwillingness in their hearts when they knew Sharon was close to their father. I don't know if it's because their ages are too far apart.
Do you hope your parents reconcile?
Now it was Navi who asked. Again, Vano and Vion just kept quiet when their girlfriends asked questions. They weren't sure what the answer was.
Sharon is our best friend.
We knew her when we first entered high school. From the outside, she looks like a girl who is fine, living life the way she wants to. But the truth is, her heart is hurting. You don't know what hardship she has gone through,
said Renata. She wanted Vano and Vion to listen. She wanted them to know how difficult Sharon's life had been.
After school, she had to work part-time to eat and pay school fees. Her parents don't care about her. Maybe even if something bad happened to her, her parents wouldn't know.
Renata continued.
That's right. You and Sharon are both victims of parental divorce, but your fate is much better because you have a very loving and responsible father. Unlike Sharon, who was dumped by both of them,
continued Novi.
In my opinion, it's not wrong if Sharon wants to get happiness in her own way. It just so happens that maybe one of her sources of happiness is the most important person to you.
Vano and Vion were still silent, not making a sound.
Now, think of your father. You know better than I do how your father's life has been. Is he happy or not? You can judge for yourselves.
After saying that, Novi and Renata excused themselves. They wanted Vano and Vion to think more carefully and calm down, remembering all their father's struggles for their happiness. Should they refuse when they knew their father was trying to find his own happiness? Vano and Vion are now in a restaurant with Dilla, their mother. When they finished their lecture, they accidentally met Dilla, and Dilla immediately asked them to come with her.
What should we talk about, Mom?
Vano asked, looking closely at the woman who had given birth to him.
It's about your father.
What did Papa do?
Vano immediately asked again, staring intently at his mother, who had a sad and pitiable face.
I'm sorry. I know I was wrong for leaving you. But it was all out of necessity. Revan didn't let me meet you.
Vion, who had been looking down, looked at Dilla in disbelief. Mom, don't lie.
Vion, why would you lie? No mother wants to be separated from her children, but circumstances can't bring us together.
Basically, despite being twins, Vano and Vion still have different personalities, although there are many similarities too. Seeing Dilla's tears, Vion was immediately sad and believed in his mother's words. Unlike Vano, who was not touched in the slightest, he knew it was all an act to gain sympathy.
Why didn't Mama try harder? Papa didn't restrain us. We were allowed to live freely according to our choices. Why didn't you try to meet us without Papa's knowledge?
Vano asked the question, which made Dilla stammer. Dilla swallowed with difficulty. She understood now. Vano was a little difficult to conquer, unlike Vion, who immediately believed him when he saw him cry.
There are many things you don't know, Vano. Mama was very difficult to meet you.
In that time, why did Mama get into the house so easily?
Again, Vano asked a question that made Dilla silent.
Vana, why are you cornering Mama?
Vion asked angrily. Vano looked at his twin and exhaled slowly.
Not cornering, just asking, and I need a rational answer.
Vano replied. He folded his arms across his chest, looking back at his mother intensely.
What do you want?
Vano asked. Dilla wiped her tears with her fingers, then looked at Vano with a pleading gaze. Vion's mind immediately went to Sharon. Actually, Vano also immediately thought about Sharon, but he didn't immediately believe it.
Don't impose your will, Ma. Papa is looking for his own happiness, and Papa's happiness is not Mama's.
Vano shot back.
Vano, you should be able to think logically. A young woman, wanting to be with a widower who has grown children, must have hidden intentions. Especially if it's not for wealth,
said Dilla. Vion, who heard this, felt that what Dilla said was true, especially considering that Sharon had been living a difficult life. Vion thought that Sharon wanted to live a happy life by using his father.
Not necessarily, Mom. I don't know what is... Vano, what you said could be the truth. It could be that Sharon is using Papa.
Vion cut Vano off, expressing his agreement with Dilla's words.
Does Sharon look like a womanizer?
Vano asked.
People will do anything to achieve their goals. Vano, she may put on a good face like an angel, but who knows what's in her heart, right?
The corner of Dilla's lips pulled up slightly to make a smile of satisfaction at being able to poison Vion's mind. Yes, although not very satisfied because Vano was not easy for her to indoctrinate.
If he's like that, then let it go. The important thing is that Papa is happy, because I'm of the same mind as Papa. Betrayal is unforgivable no matter what.
Vano grabbed his bag and left. He didn't care about Vion, who was still sitting with Dilla. It was also useless if he forced Vion. Vion was not a child that he could force at will.
Vion, you believe in Mama, right? Save your father from the people who use him?
Dilla smiled at Vion, who was silent and obeyed her words. If Revan didn't want to return to her, it was simple for Dilla. Then Revan wouldn't be able to be with anyone. And now, Dilla had Vion on her side. Sharon visited Revan's apartment after the landlord had contacted her and asked her to come there. Returning from campus, Sharon went straight to Revan's apartment. And when she got there, she saw Ren sitting on the sofa facing his laptop. For the past few weeks, Sharon and Revan had been getting very close. Sharon's feelings, which were originally comfortable and considered Revan as a substitute for her father, had changed. There was another feeling, which was clearly present because of their frequent interactions in person or only through cell phones. Many times Sharon tried to dismiss her own feelings. How could she fall in love with a man who in terms of age was more suitable to be her father? Even Revan already had 2 grown children, and the twins were even a few months older than Sharon. However, no matter how hard she denied it, Sharon could no longer change her heart for Revan. And she realized that everything was slowly changing since the day of the twins' birthday, when Revan explicitly asked her to marry him. It wasn't just Sharon who felt it all, but Revan too. His affection for Sharon, who he originally only thought as a child, slowly changed because of the attention he got from Sharon. Because in reality, they don't have the slightest blood relationship. In the end, the interactions that occurred instead brought other feelings. A week ago, Revan gently asked Sharon to be his girlfriend. Don't ask how he felt when he said that to Sharon, who was much younger than him. There were feelings of embarrassment and fear of rejection. Revan had prepared his heart and self if it was a rejection that he would receive. But apparently, Sharon accepted it. Happiness bubbled up, filling the recesses of their hearts as their status became clearer.
Revan, have you had lunch?
Sharon asked as she walked closer to Revan.
She sat beside him and touched his shoulder gently.
Not yet. I forgot again.
Revan replied with a soft sigh. His hand touched the back of Sharon's hand on his shoulder, grasping it gently.
Then I'll go out and buy some food first. I haven't had lunch yet either.
Sharon was already getting ready to leave again. However, Revan held her back, pulling Sharon back to sit beside him. Then, Revan handed Sharon his cell phone.
Just buy it online. I asked you to come here to keep me company, not to leave again.
Sharon smiled a little at that. She immediately ordered some food for her and Revan to have lunch. After finishing, Sharon put Revan's cell phone on the table. When Sharon had found a comfortable sitting position, Revan immediately lay down and made Sharon's thighs his pillow. Sharon was initially surprised, but ended up with a gentle smile. Her hand spontaneously touched Revan's hair and stroked it gently.
Thinking about what?
Sharon asked. Her eyes looked closely at Revan's face. She knew that Revan had a lot on his mind lately.
I'm still worried about the children.
Revan replied. His eyes closed with a slow sigh. Worried about his children, Vano and Vion. Sharon was silent hearing that. She understood how worried Revan was now about the 2 of them. Sharon had once advised Revan not to let Vano and Vion meet Dilla if it worried him. However, Revan didn't agree to Sharon's suggestion. Revan didn't want Vano and Vion to think that he wanted to separate them from Dilla. Sharon was stunned and confirmed Revan's words. Hence, the situation turned out to be very difficult. Except for surrendering, she hoped Vano and Vion really understood how her parents were.
They're already adults. They can see what's wrong and right,
Sharon said, trying to calm Revan down.
I'm afraid Dilla will incite them.
Revan whispered.
Only time will tell if they were instigated.
Revan was silent when he heard that. He was at a loss as to what to do. He could only try to warn Vano and Ryan about Dilla, and reassure them that he loved them very much.
If they knew about our relationship, What would you do?
Sharon asked. Raven immediately looked at Sharon closely, and Sharon waited for his answer.
I haven't thought about that yet.
Sharon smiled a little at that. Her eyes looked straight at the floor.
That's okay. The important thing is that your relationship with them should remain good.
Sharon replied. Her hand did not stop stroking Revan's hair gently. For a long time they were both silent, busy with their own thoughts. They were well aware of the consequences they would face when they decided to be in a relationship. First, they might not get the blessing of various parties, especially Vano and Vion. Secondly, there could be interference from Dilla, whose wishes are still unknown. And just maybe, a breakup that could happen. Sharon found a loving figure who could protect her in Revan. That's the reason why she now wants to always be close to Revan. Revan, on the other hand, found a caring and understanding figure, understands how his life goes and all his problems. Happy when Sharon can always reduce her anger when there is a problem. She doesn't stir things up until the atmosphere becomes chaotic. Sharon has always been a cooling water for Revan. It was true what Novi said. They find compatibility and can complement each other's empty souls. Unfortunately, there were many things they had to resolve first.
I hope they can accept our relationship.
Revan muttered. His hand touched Sharon's palm and grasped it tightly. Their eyes met and gazed at each other, channeling all their feelings through their gaze. They needed each other. However, there are many considerations that must be carefully thought through. Even so, Sharon never stopped praying that God would give her permission to live with Revan. Revan, who was lying down, immediately got up, staring at Sharon intently, then pulled the girl into his arms. Sharon did not resist, returning Revan's warm embrace and making her feel comfortable and safe.
It won't be easy, but we will try together,
Revan said. Sharon nodded in agreement, leaning her head against Revan's broad chest, listening to her lover's heartbeat.
Yes, it won't be easy, but hopefully everything will end beautifully if they can be patient and trust each other. They just needed to wait until Revan finalized everything about Dilla.
After lunch, Sharon cleaned up the food scattered on the table. Revan, meanwhile, was talking to Darren on the phone. A little, Sharon could hear their conversation even though she didn't understand the whole thing. But Revan's conversation with Darren was about something related to Dilla. Sharon was pensive for a long time after she finished washing the tableware, letting out a long sigh thinking about the continuation of her life story. Worry filled Sharon, remembering her relationship with Revan. Sharon was simultaneously worried and scared to face Vano and Vion one day. She was afraid that she was not ready if the rejection from both of them happened. Meanwhile, she was already too comfortable with Revan. If separation was the way to go, Sharon was sure it would be very difficult to forget Revan, who was very caring and loving.
Do you need help?
Sharon blinked softly, then turned around, looking at Revan, who was already standing nearby. Sharon smiled and nodded slowly.
Already done, Revan.
Come here. I have something for you.
Revan grabbed Sharon's fingers and held them tightly. He led her to the living room. Sharon was confused but followed Revan anyway. In the living room, Revan released their grip. Then they stood, facing each other. Revan took out a heart red velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a beautiful necklace.
Thank you very much, Revan. I like the necklace,
Sharon said sincerely. Revan smiled too. He came closer and immediately hugged Sharon. Closing his eyes, he felt the warm and cozy feeling that filled the recesses of his heart. Sharon truly awakened his passion for life, bringing color to his life that had always felt dark and boring, making Revan feel comfortable because Sharon was always sincere to him.
Tonight, we'll go to Mom's house,
said Revan. Hearing that, Sharon immediately looked up, staring at her lover.
What do you want?
I plan to tell Mom about our relationship.
Revan replied without hesitation. Sharon, who heard that, widened her eyes in shock.
Are you sure? We've only been together for a week.
I'm sure. Is there a problem?
I'm just afraid your mom will be surprised and not accept our relationship.
Sharon mumbled. Revan broke the hug, putting some distance between himself and Sharon, holding both of Sharon's shoulders tightly and looking intently into her eyes.
Just have faith. Mom will definitely accept and give her blessing.
Revan tried to reassure Sharon, who felt doubtful. Sharon was silent to hear that. She was too afraid that Cinta, who had always been kind to her, would turn to hate.
Are you sure your mother will be okay?
Sharon asked. Revan nodded confidently.
Okay then. But I have to go back to the boarding house first. There's no way I'm visiting Mom's house dressed like this. It would be rude.
Revan smiled at that. He ruffled Sharon's hair anxiously. Although Sharon was the same age as Vano and Vion, Revan now couldn't think of her as a child or his son's friend anymore. In Revan's eyes, Sharon was a woman who deserved to be with him. Before going to Cinta's house, Revan took Sharon back to her boarding house. He said Sharon wanted to take a shower and change her clothes first. While Sharon was at her boarding house, Revan waited in the car outside the boarding house area. Sharon got into the car. She was wearing a knee-length milk chocolate colored dress. It was paired with a bone-white cardigan and white slippers. Her back-length hair was left loose. Revan watched Sharon for a long time. He finally came to his senses when Sharon reprimanded him.
Revan, why are you looking at me like that? Is there something wrong with my appearance?
Sharon asked. Revan smiled at that and shook his head.
No, I'm not. You're beautiful.
Revan complimented her sincerely from the heart. A blush spread across Sharon's cheeks at Revan's compliment. Sharon quickly looked away, hiding her embarrassment.
Don't get tense, okay? Mom is not a scary person. You already know how good Mom is.
Sharon nodded slowly. Even though she knew Cinta was a good person, Sharon was still nervous because now the situation was different. Sharon was afraid that Cinta would think negatively of her after finding out that the two of them were in a relationship. After a few minutes of traveling, Revan and Sharon finally arrived at Cinta's yard. Getting out of the car, Sharon took a quick glance at the house next to Cinta's, which was her father's house. It looked quiet from the outside. Perhaps the people in the house were already resting. Revan took Sharon's hand and led her inside. After knocking twice on the door, Cinta opened it. She smiled happily to see who had come to visit her tonight.
Who do you think is coming at this time of night? Come on in!
Cinta invited them both to come in. There was no expression of suspicion or surprise at Revan coming alone with Sharon at night to her house.
Have you had dinner?
Not yet, ma'am.
Let's have dinner together here. You two just came together.
Cinta sat in front of Revan and Sharon, staring at the two in turn.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, I have something to tell you.
Revan said directly. He took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. He took a glance at Sharon, who looked uneasy.
I hope you don't mind. Because now, Sharon and I are in a relationship.
Revan said smoothly. Revan looked closely at his mother's face. There was no surprise there. Instead, Cinta smiled broadly.
Finally, I've been waiting for you to say this for a long time. I'm happy to hear it.
Cinta looked so happy. Sharon, who heard that, was very surprised.
From the moment I saw your interaction, I knew this would happen. But that's okay. I'm happy. If possible, you should get married as soon as possible. Sharon would make a very good wife for you, Revan.
Sharon smiled emotionally at that. She didn't expect Cinta to give her blessing so easily.
Thank you, Grandmother.
Call me Mom. Don't call me Grandma anymore.
Cinta rebuked. Sharon laughed softly at that. She tried her best to hold back her tears of joy. She looked at Revan and smiled again, feeling happy. Their hands linked again and clasped each other tightly. Happiness radiated from the faces of the three of them. Not only Revan and Sharon, Cinta was also happy to hear the news that her son was back in love with a woman. Cinta was sure that Sharon was the right person for Revan. Someone who could fill Revan's loneliness and heal his wounded heart for the past 10 years. Sharon and Revan were sitting in the dining room, along with Cinta. Cinta was very excited by the arrival of Revan and Sharon. Moreover, their arrival brought news that she had been waiting for a long time.
Sharon, let's eat.
Cinta said as she got some fried chicken for Sharon.
Thank you very much, Mom.
You're welcome. Come on, Revan.
They looked at each other and threw smiles. They had gotten Cinta's blessing. It was just a matter of time to tell Vano and Vion. After the meal, Sharon deftly helped Cinta clear the table. Cinta had refused and told Sharon to wait in the living room with Revan. However, Sharon was in no mood to let Cinta clean up after their meal alone. Finally, Cinta forced Sharon into the living room. She left the rest to Art. The three of them chatted together. Cinta couldn't stop smiling because she was happy. Finally, after all this time, choosing to be alone, her son had opened his heart to a woman again.
Vano and Vion already know,
Cinta asked. Revan and Sharon looked at each other, then shook their heads slowly.
I haven't told them yet, ma'am. Looking for the right time.
Revan replied. Cinta nodded slowly at that.
Give them understanding. Surely they will understand. They are adults, not children anymore.
Cinta advised. Revan nodded slowly. He would try. While they were talking, someone knocked on the door. Since Revan was close to the door, he opened it. Revan was silent for a moment, then walked out of the house and closed the door. Sharon's eyebrows furrowed in surprise at that. She wanted to see who was talking to Revan that he had to chat outside. However, Sharon was held back by Cinta. Cinta grabbed Sharon's hand, asking Sharon to stay quietly there.
Sharon, you love Revan, right?
Cinta's eyes stared intently at Sharon's face.
Yes, Mom. Revan made me fall in love. I didn't even realize when the feeling came,
Sharon replied a little shyly. Hearing that, Cinta smiled with relief.
That's good. I ask you to take care of Revan. Don't let Revan be disappointed,
Cinta pleaded. Sharon looked at Cinta intently, full of pleading.
Yes, ma'am. I will try to do my best for Revan.
Sharon then flashed Cinta a sweet smile that put her at ease, though not completely.
If possible, stay by Revan's side, even if Vano and Vion are against it.
Sharon listened carefully, not interrupting. Sentence after sentence from Cinta raised many questions in Sharon's mind. Sharon wanted to ask, but Revan came and entered. He closed the door and returned to his seat.
Who was it just now, Revan?
Sharon asked curiously. Revan looked at Cinta and they locked eyes for a while. Apparently, Cinta already knew how Sharon's father was these days.
Your father.
Revan answered briefly. Sharon was speechless at that.
Papa, what does he want?
Sharon asked curiously. Revan looked at Cinta, and they locked eyes for a while.
Your father saw us coming earlier, so he left this with me.
Revan handed Sharon a rectangular box. Out of curiosity, Sharon opened it. It was a necklace.
Why didn't you just come to me?
Asked Sharon, feeling disappointed. She closed the box again and put it away on the table.
His wife is watching from the doorway.
Sharon exhaled softly at that. It was sad to know that, when it was hard for her and her father to even meet.
Don't worry about it. Your father has started to realize that his household is not healthy,
Cinta said. Sharon looked at the woman, then nodded slowly. Revan looked at Sharon, who looked sad. His eyes kept staring at the box his father had just left for him.
Want to go home now?
Asked Revan. His hand touched Sharon's palm and grasped it tightly.
Go home. You have to rest,
said Cinta. Sharon looked at Cinta and nodded slowly. Revan also invited Sharon to go home immediately. On the way home, Sharon didn't say anything. Her hand was still holding the box her father had given her. Her eyes stared blankly at the road. Revan glanced at Sharon occasionally through the corner of his eye, noticing Sharon, who was brooding. When they arrived, Sharon immediately got off, as did Revan. Sharon did not forget to thank Revan for taking her home.
Thank you very much, Revan,
Sharon said. Revan nodded. He walked over to Sharon, then held her shoulder, noticing Sharon's sad face.
Get some rest. Don't think about that,
Revan advised. Sharon was silent as she listened to him. Revan watched Sharon, who was just silent. Then, Revan approached Sharon and hugged her, landing a soft peck on the top of her head. Sharon was silent, feeling Revan's gentle peck. Her heart was pounding because of that. A warm feeling filled her heart because of Revan's sweet treatment. Sharon looked up when Revan had released his kiss. Their faces were now so close with their eyes staring intensely at each other. Revan touched the side of Sharon's face and stroked it gently.
I can't rest if I leave you like this,
Revan said. Sharon laughed softly at that. Continuing to thank him in her heart, she was able to meet Revan, who was so attentive to her.
I'm fine. I really am.
Sharon tried to reassure Revan, giving his best smile so that Revan would believe her and not worry anymore.
Go home, Revan. It's already tonight,
Sharon said. Revan sighed and nodded. He stroked Sharon's hair for a moment, then got into the car. He waved his hand at Sharon, who was still standing beside his car. After that, Revan's car drove through the darkness of the night, disappearing from Sharon's sight. After Revan's car was out of sight, Sharon went into her boarding house. Today, Sharon went to college like any other day. On campus, she was with Novi and Renata. The two friends did not ask Sharon any questions. They were sorry and saddened by Sharon's life so far. Happy, too, if Sharon finds her own happiness. However, it was Vano and Vion's reaction that worried them. After leaving the class, the three of them went to the cafeteria to eat. And apparently, in the cafeteria, there was Vano as well as Vion. They were seen talking together, at a corner table that was quite far from the other children. Vano and Vion noticed the arrival of Sharon and their boyfriends. Vano's hand waved, giving the three girls the code to join them. Finally, Sharon and her two friends approached Vano and Vion's table. As they sat there, Sharon could feel Vion's sharp gaze directed at her. Sharon realized it, and she became uneasy. Why was Vion acting like that to her? After sitting at one table, Sharon didn't say anything. She just listened in silence. Vano looked normal, but not Vion, and that made Sharon uncomfortable. She became worried. Did Vion already know that she was in a relationship with Revan?
I heard there's a new tourist spot in the south that's only been open for a few weeks. If you have time, let's go there. I haven't traveled in a long time. I've been too busy with my college assignments,
said Novi. Renata nodded, agreeing.
That's fine. Whenever you go, I'll join you,
Sharon replied with a smile. Vion kept looking at Sharon sharply, making Sharon uncomfortable with the situation. He wanted to ask questions, but he was uncomfortable with the presence of his two best friends there. Suddenly, a female student approached Sharon. She smiled at everyone there, then approached Sharon and spoke to her.
Someone is looking for you. He's waiting for you by the gate,
the girl said in a low voice. Who? Sharon asked.
I don't know, but that person said he didn't want to be seen by Stella when he came to see you.
Sharon was stunned to hear that. Stella was her father's stepdaughter. Could it be her father who came to the campus and wanted to meet her?
Rain, just go over. It could be her,
said Navi, who knew who Stella was in Sharon's life. Sharon nodded and left immediately. Her eyes glanced at Stella, who was also in the cafeteria with her friends. They both knew that they were half-sisters. However, neither Sharon nor Stella had ever greeted each other. Many things made them not get along and did not want to know each other.
Stella.
What's Sharon's relationship with Stella?
Asked Vano. She knew the girl quite well, as they were in the same major and sat near each other in class several times.
She's Sharon's half-sister from her father.
I'm pretty sure it was her father who was looking for Sharon. That's why the man said he didn't want Stella to see him.
Why is that?
Stella and her mother reject Sharon as family member. In fact, they often get angry if Sharon is given money by her father. In fact, even that is rare.
Yes, that's true. Stella's mother wants her to be treated as her own child by Sharon's father, but she doesn't want to think of Sharon as her own child. Selfish anyway.
Vano and Vion were silent upon hearing that. They had just found out that Sharon had a half-sister who was the same age and even went to the same university. Of course, they were surprised, because Stella and Sharon's styles were much different. While Sharon looked simple, Stella was the opposite. She even has a vehicle worth hundreds of millions that she always takes to campus.
Then what about Sharon's mom?
Asked a curious Vano.
The same. Sharon's mother is busy with her stepchildren and ignores Sharon. That's why, even though Sharon still has complete parents, she feels like an orphan because she's been living without parents for a long time.
Novi and Renata told everything according to the facts and reality. Vion felt sorry when he heard that, but he still didn't want Sharon to be with her father. After hearing that, Vano and Vion were silent. They didn't speak, busy with their own thoughts. Novi and Renata looked at each other for a long time. They both hoped that Vano and Vion would not question Sharon's relationship with Revan. After meeting with her father, Sharon got into Revan's car, who deliberately came to campus to pick her up. As usual, Revan invited Sharon to have lunch together. Today's meeting with her father felt fine, although she still felt sad because she couldn't interact freely. Her father was too afraid of Stella realizing their meeting would cause trouble.
Your father seems to be trying hard to make amends,
Revan said. Sharon was silent at that. Yes, it did feel like that. Before long, Revan's car was parked at a Japanese restaurant. Sharon and Revan got out of the car together. As they were about to enter the restaurant, they accidentally bumped into someone.
Wow, we met again, finally.
The person smiled wryly, looking at Revan and Sharon in turn. Then his eyes looked at Sharon and Revan's hands that were clasped together.
Duh, aren't you embarrassed, Revan? Dating a girl your son's age anyway,
she said in a mocking tone. Revan gave a sharp look at the person who was none other than Dilla.
None of your business.
Dilla smiled sarcastically at that.
I won't give up, Revan. I'll keep trying to get Vano and Vion back to me,
Dilla threatened. Revan let out a rough breath at that.
Go ahead. Someday, they will also realize how far from good their mother's true character is.
Revan turned around and pulled Sharon into the restaurant. Dilla looked annoyed to see him, but a second later, she smiled sarcastically again.
Really? Too bad Vion is already on my side,
she muttered. Her eyes looked sarcastically at Revan and Sharon, who were having lunch together. He snorted softly, feeling annoyed.
Oh my, dating a snot-nosed kid. Such low taste. How embarrassing.
Dilla was still standing there, looking at her ex-husband with another woman. Unconsciously, she burned her own heart seeing Revan, who treated Sharon so well. It was so different when he was with her. If there were no classes, Sharon would spend time with Revan. Sometimes they would go for a walk or just stay in the apartment, sharing stories, enjoying time together. If it was late, then Sharon would be taken home by Revan to the boarding house, and that almost happened every day. The same was true today. After spending time together since noon, finally at 8 in the evening, Revan took Sharon home. Not forgetting, Revan always gives a gentle peck on the top of the head, making Sharon feel very loved. After Revan's car was out of sight, Sharon turned around to go into her boarding house. She squealed in shock when someone suddenly stood in front of her.
Vano, what are you doing here?
Sharon asked in surprise, to Vano, who was standing near the boarding area. Vano did not answer immediately, staring in the direction Revan's car had just left.
I want to talk to you alone.
Vano spoke seriously. Sharon looked around. There were only two of them there.
Come inside.
Sharon invited Vano into her boarding house. Upon entering Sharon's boarding room, Vano wandered around. It was only a Forks 4 room with an ensuite bathroom. It felt cramped for Vano, who had a very spacious room. Inside the room, there was a single bed, a 2-door wardrobe, a study table, and a dressing table. That's all. Vano immediately chose to sit in a chair near the dressing table, paying attention to Sharon, who cleaned up her books on the study table.
Sorry if you're uncomfortable, because this room is cramped.
Sharon said unpleasantly.
Vano only gave a small nod in response. Sharon then sat on the edge of the bed, facing Vano.
Why aren't you honest with me and Vion if you have a relationship with my father?
Vano immediately asked the question. Sharon looked down and sighed softly at that. Vano must have seen how she and Revan interacted earlier in front of the boarding house.
Sorry, it wasn't meant to be hidden, but we were waiting for the right time to tell you.
And when will that time be?
There's a lot to think about and consider first, Vano. It's not that easy.
Sharon tried to explain. Vano took a deep breath and exhaled roughly. His eyes looked intensely at Sharon.
Since when have you been in a relationship with my father?
Just 1 week.
Vano was silent for a long time hearing that, trying to calm himself down first so as not to get angry.
When you're with Papa, does my mom always come?
Sharon was silent for a moment and nodded.
What does my mom always say?
Vano asked curiously. He wanted to make sure whether what his mother said was true or false.
Your mother, she always talks about the same thing. She wants you and Vion to be with her and leave Revan behind. But Revan certainly won't do that easily. Revan loves you and Vion very much.
Sharon answered honestly.
Did my mother ever talk about reconciliation?
Sharon looked back at Vano no less intensely.
No!
They were both silent for a long time, busy with their own thoughts. And Sharon, already feeling worried that Vano and Vion would indeed not give their blessing.
It's okay, Sharon. Love does not look at age. I've been watching you guys for a while. And I know that Papa is also comfortable with you. I haven't even seen him so excited in all this time, since the divorce with Mama.
Although it was still hard to accept reality, Vano could still think clearly.
Since a long time ago, Papa always failed to remarry because his future wife rejected me and Vion. And Papa is more concerned with the two of us. So I guess now it's time for me and Vion to understand Papa's wishes.
Sharon was surprised to hear that. She immediately stood up and approached Vano.
I only ask you one thing, Sharon. Please don't hurt my father. Don't make my father disappointed.
Vano pleaded. He grabbed Sharon's hand and held it very tightly. Sharon smiled at that. He nodded several times.
I will try my best, Vano. I promise.
Vano smiled a little at that. He let go of Sharon's hand and hugged the girl. After a long time, Vano released his hug. He looked at Sharon seriously.
I will support anything that makes Papa happy. But Sharon, Vion is not of the same mind as me, so I hope you can be patient until he changes his mind. I will try to give him understanding.
Sharon was silent hearing that. She thought Vion would accept it easily. Apparently not. Finished with his business with Sharon, Vano said goodbye to go home. After Vano's return, Sharon sat on the edge of the bed and was pensive, thinking about Vion's reaction to seeing her with Revan. Sharon touched the pendant of the necklace given by Revan and closed her eyes. Saying a prayer, hopefully Vion can melt and accept it. At 10 p.m., Vano and Vion were still asleep. They were talking in Vion's room, and the situation turned tense when Vion had raised his voice. Vano looked sharply at Vion, who had dared to yell at him.
You still don't understand, Vano? Sharon will only take advantage of Papa. No, Vion. Why do you trust her so much? Was she done to you? Vion, where has your smart brain gone? You can't even judge what's right and wrong. You're to David in more than Mama?
Asked Vion. Vano stood up, walked over to Vion, and looked at him sharply.
Vion, who would want their parents to divorce? No one. I also want Papa and Mama to get back together so that we can have a complete family. But I don't want my wish to make Papa suffer. Mama had already inflicted a deep wound on Papa, and Sharon came as a medicine for that wound. For me now, Papa's happiness is more important. I don't want to be selfish and make Papa sacrifice his happiness again. It's been quite 10 years since Papa was alone and raised us alone, sacrificing his own happiness for our sake.
Vano tried to maintain his tone of voice, so as not to yell at Vion, even though his heart was filled with anger because Vion raised his voice at him. Vano approached Vion and patted his shoulder several times.
If Papa and Mama reconcile, will that guarantee Papa's happiness? Think about it.
After saying that, Vano walked out of Vion's room. He did all this not for Sharon's sake, but for his own father's happiness. After being met by Vano last night, the next morning Sharon was picked up by Vion when going to campus. Sharon was surprised, especially considering Vano's words last night that Vion was not of the same mind as Vano.
Come in, we have to talk.
Inevitably, Sharon got into Vion's car. She was worried, considering Vion had always been cynical about her lately. Sharon couldn't stop thinking bad thoughts about Vion. However, she was relieved when Vion invited her to have breakfast at a restaurant. After choosing a seat and ordering food, Vion immediately asked a question. Without further ado,
Do you really love my father, Sharon?
Vion's eyes looked sharply into Sharon's eyes. Sharon took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. She looked at Vion seriously.
Yes, I do love your father, Vion. I'm sorry if my feelings make you uncomfortable.
Are you sure it's love? You're not trying to use my father, are you?
Asked Vion suspiciously. Sharon's eyebrows shot up at that.
Taking advantage of what?
Money.
Sharon's eyes widened in shock at that. She didn't expect Vion to think that way.
Vion, do I look like someone who wants to drain your father's wealth? If I were like that, I would have done it a long time ago.
Sharon felt incredulous at Vion's thoughts. It hurt, of course.
I've lived a hard life all these years. I had to work on my own to pay rent for my room and food, even to pay for school and college now. I have to pay for it myself. But with all that, it doesn't mean I want your father's money. Vion, no.
Sharon's eyes were already glazed over. Her chest felt tight at Vion's accusation just now.
I still live in a small, cramped boarding room. I still have to work to earn money. You see how I look. I don't even have nice branded clothes.
Sharon wiped her tears roughly, then smiled sadly, laughing at herself. This was her fate to have to live a hard life. So when she got close to someone, she would be seen as eyeing his wealth.
If I had such bad intentions, maybe I should be living in a luxurious apartment by now. No need to work and just focus on studying. Shopping and shopping is all I'll do.
Vion was silent at that. He looked away as Sharon wiped away her tears again. They were silent for a long time, until finally the waiter came to bring their order. Sharon's appetite was gone now. She didn't feel hungry anymore.
I want you to stay away from my father, Sharon.
Vion's words just now made Sharon stunned. Staring at Vion, he didn't understand.
I want Papa and Mama to get back together. You must also know what it's like for parents to divorce, and I want to have a whole family.
Vano's words last night didn't seem to enter his brain. He believed and listened to his mother too much.
Are you sure your parents want to reconcile?
Mama has asked Papa to reconcile, Sharon. I'm sorry, but you're getting in the way of them getting back together.
When? When we met, your mother never said she wanted to reconcile with your father. She just...
What do you know about my mother, Sharon? I'm her son who knows better.
Vion apped. He looked down, staring at the toe of his slippers.
I'm sorry, Vion, but I can't stay away from your father.
Thank you. Then you've ruined my hopes of having an intact family.
Vion's words seemed to pierce Sharon's heart. It made Sharon feel pain. Was he bad for not being able to comply with Vion's wishes? Vion immediately ate his food and didn't speak again. Sharon watched him closely. Vion daydreamed a few times, then went back to chewing. He acted as if Sharon wasn't in front of him. Finished eating, Vion stood up and paid for his food. He immediately left there, leaving Sharon, who was still silent, alone. Sharon pondered, thinking about what Vion said about his wish for Revan and Dilla to reconcile. Sharon let out a rough breath. Although reluctant, she still ate her food with a lack of enthusiasm. She had class in half an hour and had to leave for the campus immediately. After class, Sharon took a taxi back to Revan's apartment. Revan called her and asked her to go there. When she arrived at Revan's apartment, Sharon didn't find Revan in the living room. She looked for him in the kitchen and other rooms. but he wasn't there. Until finally, Sharon went into Revan's room. Apparently, Revan was lying on the bed.
Revan?
Come in.
Revan's voice sounded weak, making Sharon worried. She quickly approached Revan and looked at his condition.
What's wrong?
Sharon asked frantically. Revan smiled a little at Sharon's panic. He was worried and happy at the same time because someone was worried about him.
I have a cold. Rin, I'm not feeling well.
Sharon exhaled softly, then touched Revan's hand and grasped it tightly.
That's why you have to eat regularly and get enough rest. Don't think too much and don't go out all night.
Revan said.
On purpose, actually. Let you take care of me.
Sharon chuckled at that, making Revan chuckle amusedly.
Old people don't go around looking for diseases,
Sharon said as she pinched Revan's arm. Revan winced in pain, then laughed softly. It was fun to see Sharon's annoyed face.
How was your lecture today?
Sharon immediately fell silent at that.
It was fine, Mas. No problem.
She didn't lie because her conversation with Vion earlier was not a lecture matter.
Don't lie. You're hiding something from me.
Revan said with his eyes fixed on Sharon.
What's the matter?
Revan asked again. He pulled Sharon's hand so that she would face him. Sharon lowered her face, refusing to meet his gaze. She didn't want Revan to realize her anxiety.
Sharon, answer me.
Revan said softly. He pulled Sharon's body closer to him. Then he grabbed the side of Sharon's face so that she could look into his eyes. And Revan knew there was sadness and fear there.
Revan, if Vano or Vion were to oppose our relationship, what would you do?
Finally, Sharon asked a question that suited her current situation, where Vion did not agree with their relationship.
Try to convince them that this is not the wrong choice.
Revan answered confidently, grasping Sharon's hand tightly, proving that he wasn't lying. Sharon was silent for a long time, until she finally chose to tell Revan about Vano and Vion already knowing about their relationship.
Actually, they already know about our relationship. Vano is supportive, but not Vion,
Sharon said softly. Revan was silent when he heard that. Of course he was shocked to hear that, because he hadn't told his 2 children yet.
How do they know?
Revan asked, curiously.
They often see us together outside. So, they jumped to that conclusion. They asked me too, and I answered honestly. I'm sorry I didn't ask your opinion first, Mas.
Revan sighed softly at that. Pulling Sharon into his arms, he tried to calm her down.
Don't worry and be afraid. I'll talk to Vion.
Revan tried to comfort Sharon. Sharon nodded softly in Revan's arms. She returned her lover's embrace, enjoying the warmth that spread throughout her body, feeling the comfort that filled her heart. Vano realized there was something strange between Vion and Sharon. Finally, he tried to find out what happened between them, and Vion answered easily when Vano asked.
I asked Sharon to stay away from Papa.
Vion answered casually and calmly. Vano sighed softly at that. He massaged his head that felt dizzy. It was all in vain that he refrained from scolding Vion last night. He just hoped that Vion would understand what he meant. Apparently, his twin was still sticking to his stance, defending his mom.
Are you crazy? You'd make Papa sad if you did that.
Vano said, still trying to contain his emotions.
Whatever you want. Papa might still be affected by... Papa isn't affected by anyone. Papa is not someone who is easily fooled by others. Make sure that...
Vano rebuked him. Vion looked away and turned around.
I just want to have a complete family. Vano, is that wrong? No, it's not. But you have to think. Would Papa want to go back to Mama? Papa will. As long as Sharon is out of his life. And that means you're opening up Papa's old wounds caused by Mama. Not to mention, you will make Papa sad by separating him from the person he loves.
Vano said passionately, hoping Vion would open his mind and heart. Vano did not want to have a whole family, but to realize a whole family, it is the father who will suffer and be tormented. In addition, there is no guarantee that the mother will be loyal and not make the same mistakes. Dilla is indeed Vano's biological mother. Vano will never forget the fact that she was the one who carried him and gave birth to him, risking her life. But Vano couldn't close his eyes to his mother's past mistakes either.
Vano, you still don't understand what I mean?
Asked Vion angrily. Vano exhaled a rough breath, trying to suppress his own anger. He wanted to give Vion a punch, hoping to get his twin's brain working again. However, he didn't want to fight. After Vion left, Vano looked for Sharon. He had to talk to the girl again, ask her what Vion had said to her.
Sharon.
Vano shouted, calling his father's girlfriend. Sharon turned around and looked at Vano with a confused look.
What?
Sharon asked in surprise.
Where are you going?
Home. Why?
Not seeing my father.
Sharon gave Vano a glance and walked back without giving an answer. For some reason, it sounded like a sarcastic question to her.
Sharon, we need to talk.
Talk about what again? About you changing your mind and being the same as Vion now?
Sharon asked directly.
No, that's not it.
Then what?
Asked Sharon impatiently. Vano did not answer and immediately pulled Sharon towards his car. Reluctantly, Sharon got into Vano's car.
Vano, what about Renata? Don't neglect her,
said Sharon.
I'm sure she'll understand. I just want to help my father get his happiness.
Vano replied. He gave Sharon a quick look and then drove the car out of the campus area. Vano took Sharon to a cafe and invited Sharon to chat there.
Have you contacted Renata? She must be looking for you,
Sharon said worriedly. She was afraid that Renata would think all kinds of things about her going out with Vano.
Not yet. I'll contact her later.
Do you really love her or not? You should be concerned about her too,
Sharon reprimanded. Vano rolled his bored eyeballs hearing that. He took his cell phone and immediately contacted Renata, apologizing to his lover for spending less time together these days. Vano said honestly that he was with Sharon, discussing about his father and mother. Luckily, Renata understood and encouraged Vano to gracefully accept Sharon into his family.
I want to know what Vion has told you,
Vano said after finishing contacting Renata, then put his cell phone back on the table.
You don't need to know, Vano. Just focus on your goal of giving understanding to Vion,
Sharon replied. First, she didn't want to remember all of Vion's hurtful words to her. Secondly, he didn't want Vano to get even angrier at Vion if he knew Vion had accused Sharon directly.
How far has your relationship with Papa gone?
Vano looked at Sharon curiously. Sharon's eyes squinted in distaste at the question.
Don't think anything, Vano.
I'm just curious.
And that's privacy. You don't have the right to know,
Sharon snapped back. Of course, Sharon gave the wrong answer, because her answer just now made Vano even more suspicious.
Are you serious about my father? I mean, you're still young while my father already has grown children.
I wouldn't have gotten into a relationship with your father if I didn't want to accept that fact. Never mind. It's not something that should be questioned anymore. Age doesn't matter,
Sharon said resentfully. Vano was silent hearing that. He still couldn't believe that the girl in front of him was his father's lover. It's hard to believe, but it's reality.
Wait here. I'll go back first.
Vano immediately got up and left Sharon. Shortly after Vano left, the waiter came to deliver the order. Sharon ordered a strawberry milkshake and fries. Meanwhile, Vano only ordered sweet black coffee. Sharon took her fries and started eating them. Her left hand held her cell phone, replying to a message from Revan.
I'm at home. Come over. I want to be taken care of by you.
I'm approaching one of your children first, Revan. After the discussion, I'll be there.
Vano, is it? Don't let you fall in love with him later.
I won't. Trust me.
Sharon smiled and put her phone away on the table. She didn't expect Revan to be jealous of his own son. But that was only natural, because Sharon and Vano were the same age.
You're alone. Where's that sugar daddy you used to be with,
A voice sounded so close, making Sharon look up. Her eyes widened slightly to see Dilla, who was standing next to her desk.
Why are you so surprised? What I said is true.
Dilla spoke sarcastically. Sharon just kept quiet and tried to ignore it. She didn't want to get into any further trouble with Dilla.
It looks like Revan is away for a while.
Dilla smiled slyly as she saw a cup of coffee on the table. Sharon, who heard that, just kept quiet without trying to correct that the one she was with was Vano, not Revan.
You're beautiful, still young, still have a bright future. Why should you date someone's husband?
Sharon, who had been ignoring, immediately looked at Dilla, who was still standing. Her eyebrows knitted together in confusion at Dilla's words. Even more confused, she saw Dilla's sad face.
Sorry, what do you mean?
Sharon asked, not understanding. Unexpectedly, Dilla burst into tears, making her and Sharon the attention of other visitors.
You're still asking questions as if you don't know anything, even though you have tried to destroy my household.
Sharon's eyes widened at that. Her attention was now diverted to the other cafe patrons. They started looking at Sharon sarcastically after hearing Dilla's words. And Sharon understood now. Dilla wanted to slander her.
Don't slander me.
Slander. It's obvious that you've always tried to contact my husband. You and my husband even secretly spent the night in the apartment together. Do you still want to deny it?
Sharon shook her head softly. She didn't expect Dilla to be this cunning. No wonder Cinta hated Dilla so much.
Just beat that kind of harlot. You're shameless. How can a beautiful woman be a harlot? You cheap bastard.
Sharon's face heated up at the insults from the cafe patrons directed at her. She was cornered now. Meanwhile, Dilla smiled with satisfaction. As she received support from the other patrons, Dilla grew bolder. She picked up the coffee cup on the table and intended to douse Sharon. Sharon closed her eyes, trying to protect herself with her hands. But after a while, Sharon didn't feel anything on her body. Slowly, Sharon opened her eyes. She widened her eyes in surprise to see Vano, who was already standing in front of her, protecting her from Dilla's dousing.
Vano.
Dilla stammered as she saw her son standing between her and Sharon. Her face turned pale at the sight of Vano, who turned to her and looked at her sharply.
Ma, I respect you as my mother, and I didn't expect you to be this cunning to get what you want.
Vano smiled sarcastically. His right arm looked red from the coffee. Incidentally, Vano was wearing a short t-shirt, so his arm was visible. Dilla's face turned pale as she listened to Vano's words.
How dare you say such things about Sharon? She is a kind and respectable woman.
Vano's expression turned serious as he looked at his mother.
Who do you call a mistress? Did you forget that you were the one who had an affair 10 years ago and ended up divorcing Papa? Why are you now slandering Sharon? I have nothing to do with Papa anymore. And Papa is free to have a relationship with anyone.
Dilla's face became even more pained by Vano's words. The visitors, who were originally insulting Sharon, turned to look at Dilla upset because she had lied.
I beg you, May. Don't make Papa even more hurt. Accept the fact that Papa can no longer return to Mama. Because I, too, cannot forgive a betrayal.
After saying that, Vano took out the money and put it on the table, inviting Sharon to leave immediately. Disappointment was clearly visible in Vano's eyes, seeing his mother's behavior just now. Vano also felt embarrassed for Sharon. Luckily, he was on time so Sharon didn't get splashed by his mother. Vion should have seen what happened just now, so that he can know how his mother's character is cunning.